The famous federal police report is out, backing the accusation made by the court and the victim, Alexandre de Moraes, who's the meme of the moment, right? Alexandre de Moraes is the victim, the judge, and the accuser. You can't say this is normal either, can you? You definitely can't say this is normal and everything's fine, and that this whole story needs to be framed in the following context. This mess of a state can't even claim to be a democratic rule of law, right? The Brazilian Republic, with its checks and balances and power structures, is completely in tatters. It's destroyed. This goes beyond the three branches, including armed forces and foreign political agents. Bolsonaro's end of term turned into a complete mess. And obviously this strengthens our friends from this political apparatus created in the Supreme Court to govern Brazil. I'm using our friends here as an example, you know? So here's the deal, man. It's a war where each side calls the other a coup plotter, but they're all guilty. And we're the victims of this coup mentality. When I say we, I mean the people of this mess called Brazil. Let's be honest, you can't tell me this is natural or normal. You're living under a regime where unelected Supreme Court figures have the final say, contradicting the idea of democracy with their decisions as the primary source of law. Do you get what I'm saying here? Type 1, if you understand. Primary source of law. A Supreme Court judge's imagination is now a source of law. It's a primary source because they have, let's say, constitutional power. So they invented a new way to basically govern Brazil. They created a new type of inquiry and decision-making. They've become an original source of power. They are now the source of law. Orlando's here, I think. Someone could ask him, right? But I believe Carl Schmitt talks about this. In crises, you see where true authority comes from. During Bolsonaro's pandemic fight, it was about authority. Could Bolsonaro stop virus containment measures or not? Suddenly, authority emerges. Where does the ultimate authority lie? With the Supreme Court. From then on, it became clear. Now, power is exercised through the...
Well, the issue of authority in Brazil was almost like a vacuum for a long time. Political authority failed, and the question of political authority in Brazil was nearly overcome. With the erosion of political authority, especially after Dilma's second term, a power vacuum emerged. Remember, there was an impasse when the Supreme Court and politicians couldn't reach agreements, some even refusing to follow court orders. Then the army acted as a mediator with Vila das Boas' letter to the Supreme Court. What did that signify? Brazilian political institutions were experiencing a vacuum of authority. A figure needed to emerge as a mediator because crises always require a balancing force. Carl Schmitt worked with the basic distinction between friend and enemy. The key thing beyond friend and foe is how friends can become enemies and how enemies can become friends. It all depends on where you aim to climb in the power structure. Alexandre de Moraes rises to the Supreme Court moderately right-wing. His power stems from the right's loss of will to wield authority. Bolsonaro's government arrived aiming to reform state institutions radically. This Jacobin desire was in Satyagraha, then Lava Jato, then Bolsonaro's rule. It's a desire for complete overhaul. What's wrong with wanting total reform? First, there was no serious political authority. Bolsonaro never was one. Secondly, this Jacobin-like desire does away with political authority as it can't have a centralized power. Logically, the Jacobin both beheads others and gets beheaded himself. He beheads others and gets beheaded himself. Who managed to centralize this, risking not just skin, but also institutional protection? Alexandre de Moraes. Clearly, there's an illegitimate concentration of power in Moraes that's harming Brazilian democracy. I think that's undeniable.